Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Triangle Modern Web. This is our first virtual version of our meetup. So we hope that you are all well and staying safe and practicing social distancing. So hang in there. We'll get through this before we know it and kind of be back to normal life, I suppose. We have a lot of sponsors here today. Let's see. First, we have TJ with Progress.
Yeah, hey everyone. I almost feel like since I'm speaking on behalf of a sponsor, I need like some low ambient music so I can say like in these troubled times sort of feel. But no, I'm TJ. I'm from the Kender React team. If you haven't heard of us before, we make UI components. We make everything from say like form controls, like date pickers, drop downs and whatnot, all the way up to really more professional controls. So think things like schedulers, data grids, full chart and graph libraries, and whatnot. So if you are looking for some of those more professional UI components, if you're looking for like a suite of components that you can standardize throughout, say, your company, we have something like 80 plus UI components that are easily used. Like I said, I work on the Kender React team. Kender UI, we also have components for Vue, also for jQuery, and for Angular as well. So check us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Then we have Todd with All Things Open.
Thanks, Tara. Yeah, I am with All Things Open. We are a large open source, open tech, open web conference that takes place every October. We also do the Open Source 101 series. Maybe you've heard of Open Source 101. You can find us at opensource101.com. We just did our first virtual conference for that particular property. But anyway, I just wanted to say we've got some big announcements coming up. The conference is scheduled to take place in October. Big speaker announcements coming up, and registration will open up shortly. So please be on the lookout for that. You can find more about everything that we do at allthingsopen.org, allthingsopen.org. Tara, thank you for the opportunity. You really do a great job with this meetup. This is a very good one. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Todd.
Yep, you bet.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
Next, we have Commerce Tools. By adopting cutting-edge programming techniques and languages, contributing extensively to open source, and founding new cloud event specifications, Commerce Tools is leading retailers into this new omnichannel world. As an API-first, API-only SaaS, the Commerce Tools platform is built to be extensible, allowing for serverless extensions, event-driven design, and hosted worldwide across multiple cloud providers. Their team in Durham is helping to build this global company from the scenic American Tobacco campus. Though currently everyone is working from home, the company continues to grow. Every month they're adding new faces who bring a passion for technology, business, and a focus on culture. Check out our live chat for a link to check out their openings. And I'm going to chat that to you right now, actually. So that should be coming. So if you're interested, go check that out to see what they have available. And last but not least, we have this.labs, your partners in modern digital transformation. We specialize in mentorship, consulting, training, and staff augmentation for enterprise organizations. You can find out more at this.labs.com or send us an email at hi@this.co. We have 3 great speakers for you here tonight. We are going to be starting off with Trenton Trama, a principal engineer, playmaker, health, and CTO for Notiflyer.com. He'll be talking on your employer is data-driven. Why aren't you? And then we have Scott Wittrock, VP of Product at Slice. His talk is on design systems with web components. And then we have Steve Pietrek, practice manager and developer at Insight Digital Innovation. He will be talking to us on what VS Code extensions and themes he uses. A couple of announcements before we move on and get started. If any of you are familiar, you know that Modern Web puts on a lot of monthly events, and we actually have a very exciting special online event tomorrow. Please join us for a special Angular International Women's Day, where we celebrate women leadership and engineering. We'll have great talks, panels, and fresh perspectives, and see how women are leading the charge in Angular today. You can get the link to join at angularmeetup.com. Also, if you aren't already aware, based on this list here, we have GraphQL, Angular, React, and Vue meetups. We do these once a month. Every week we have a new framework that we're covering. So you can stay up to date on our website at thisdot.co. We keep them updated pretty regularly. And if you ever have any questions or are interested in being a part of these meetups, giving a talk, please let us know by shooting us an email at hi@thisdot.co. So this is our schedule for tonight that we will try to stick to. First up, we'll be having Trent talk, and then we will move on to Scott. We'll take a brief intermission where we will play a fun game called JavaScript Jeopardy. I do need to warn you that there is a awkward 15-ish second delay between whenever I'm talking and give you the question and when you type in what your answer will be. So there's going to be a little bit of an awkward silence where I'm trying to decide if you're still thinking about what the answer is versus waiting for the answer to come through. And when we're done with that, we have Steve, who will be finishing us off with his talk before we say goodnight and goodbye. So that said, we are going to get started with Trent. Trent, I am going to put your screen in and get the rest of us out. So why don't you take it away?
All right, cool. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. My name is Trenton Trama. Today, I am going to be talking about you becoming data-driven. We recently went through a huge ordeal with COVID, and unfortunately, a lot of tech companies have had to furlough or even lay off their employees because even though they can work remote, the sales streams have dried up. This is going to be a short talk to help you not be one of the people next in line by making yourself look and appear better to your boss and your managers. So, first off, who am I? I'm Trenton Trama. I have quite a few roles that I fill, but it primarily falls into 3 buckets. Full-time, I am the principal engineer for web and data development at Playmaker Health. We do data analytics for post-acute agencies. On the side, I provide strategy and technical guidance for the startup Notifier, helping them identify interesting flight deals to mail out to their customers, basically a clone of Scott's Cheap Flights, which I'm confident everyone has heard of. But what I'm really the most confident about is offering performance coaching to software engineers. All right, so start off with the pitch. This is mainly about being data-driven, but requires you to reframe yourself first and start kind of following a pattern for how you operate within the business that you're hired in. Even though it's a phrase that every coach throws around, I promise I won't use the words personal brand because that's just ridiculous. What I primarily do is help you reframe the focus of your career development into business development, because there's a huge amount of overlap between your career and a baby startup. And I think that you see businesses be more successful than individual careers. At the core of it, you have your skills, which are the product that you offer to potential employees or customers. And if you don't come to the table with the appropriate set of skills, you won't draw the interest of a recruiter going through a stack of resumes. Next up, you've got your marketing pillar, or the development of your network. That's not fun. I don't like building up my network, and I'm pretty sure you may not either. And finally, you have the fun part, your performance, which is a reflection of the value that you provide outside of what you are hired to do, outside of the skills that you have. Because it is not just the skills that you have in your team, but how you make your team and your company function better because you're around. The great thing is we can increase our value without learning a single skill and just taking 5 to 10 minutes a minute out of every single day. It's mainly about being focused on doing the right things. All right, so data-driven. It's a buzzword. Lots of companies are trying to become data-driven. They're trying to make their decisions, trying to take the huge amounts of data that they already generate and analyze it and make a decision off of it. It is something that is very hard to achieve, and most companies won't make it there. However, you can become data informed a lot more easily. And this is you as in the developer, not you as in the company. So what we're trying to do here is improve our performance, which doesn't necessarily mean increasing the number of widgets we make or writing more code. It means allowing the information that you've collected over time to guide what activities you work on to increase your value. Since this is an engineering workup, I am willing to bet that everyone here has had their hands in a data collection project in just the last year, either data collection or analysis or generating reports. Some of you, that's your job. The data analysts and the machine learning people, they built their entire careers around helping a business take huge amounts of data and condense it into a single or a small set of answers. Unfortunately, this is a lot harder to translate into your personal or career life. And if you ask a developer what they've done in the last month, what they've achieved, they may have trouble telling you. Then to make it even worse, a year out, whenever you're having to fill out your performance review, you don't know what you really did. You spent an entire year working, putting things together. You've had achievements, but you sure can't tell your boss what that is. So I have a pretty unique way of helping you track that and helping you increase the value that you provide to your company. I call it Agile. Not really. What it really is a combination of business development structures that share a similarity with Agile, specifically the iterative facet of it, where we cycle through, look back, and repeat. The main thing is to focus on collecting your feedback at the end of a sprint, analyzing it, and deciding whether or not you're going to move forward with what you're currently doing. It's only 5 steps. First up, step 0, and the most important, you need to figure out where you're at so you know where to go. Because when you are trying to increase your visibility, increase your value, it is about directing your focus to the things that are most recognizable or most valuable to everyone around you. So the way you do that is increase the overlap you have with other important things or important projects. Schedule some time with the people around you, your individual teammates, your manager, your director, whoever you can talk to, and find out what their goals are. Find out what their vision is as well, because each person tends to have their own ideas for what the place should become. Next, talk to other departments, because we're not all just in the tech bubble. You talk to the product department, talk to customer service, see what problems that they're having, see what they want to see the company become, and then come back to analyze that. Where do you overlap with it? Do you have skills that line up with what the company is trying to achieve? Are you able to fill in a gap that no one else is filling? And then take a look. Is the work that you're currently doing aligned with the company's current or future goals? By the time you finish, you should probably have at least a half-formed vision about what you can do to help your company, and I call this a side goal. The side goal is what you work on the side, because we unfortunately do not get to dictate every single thing that we do within our job. I know I don't get the Google 20% project time, and I don't think I've met very many people who do. So you have a side goal, which is what you do alongside your regular work. So after you've figured out what that is, you start putting together or you decide what your goal is for your next cycle or your next sprint. Basically take that side goal, take a look at what you normally do, and see how you can fit the two of those together. Then, just like with sprint planning and ticket refinement, break that down. What can you do in the next week that contributes to the side goal that you're trying to achieve and allows you the flexibility and time to actually work on it? Next up, for example, I know this is a problem that I've had before. I'm the person that everyone comes to whenever there's a client complaining and they want me to generate a custom report for them. That report isn't that custom. It's the exact same 90% of query every single time with a couple of adjustments in maybe variables or something else on the side. If your side goal is to decrease the amount of, or decrease the customer support time because you've heard that is a problem, your cycle goal can be identifying the 10% that needs to be dynamic and document it. You don't have to write a single line of code for it, and you've made progress. Next up, you cycle through again and you start creating the report. Make it programmatic, make it something that anybody with technical skills can pick up and run and do your job. Because if somebody else can do your job, you've actually done a really good job. And then after you've done that, you can iterate a few more times, make it visible or available to people outside of yourself or your team. And now you have filled in a gap. Each time, you still are focusing on the individual tasks you have. Your manager can't complain to you that you're not doing your work, but you are improving the process along the way. So, in short, look at your side goal, pick out a single story that you can work on alongside your current work, and move forward with that. All right, next up, tracking. This is where the lost my screen. This is where we turn back to the concept of becoming data-driven. For your employer, this means KPIs. There, you have your lines of code tracked. You have the number of commits you make in a week tracked. They know all sorts of numbers about you that don't describe you as a person. It's very nice. It's very high level, but very emotionless. And whenever it comes to who's on the team, those numbers are valuable and important, but they aren't the ultimate decider in who stays, who goes, and who's coming in. So these are nice, very high level numbers that you should be aware of and be sure that you are obtaining the way you are expected to. But we are interested in measuring how we're making progress toward bettering your team or your company. That means that your tracking is a lot simple. You don't have to generate reports out of Jira and combine that with Bitbucket. You just have to basically create a daily journal. And again, Agile-like, you structure it like your daily stand-up. What did you do? What are you going to do? What problems are you having? Importantly, what problems are other people having? And then the last three are, what did you win? What did you lose? And how did you feel about anything? This probably won't take you more than 5 minutes at the end of the day as you're shutting down. And I agree, it's stupidly simple, but it works. You're doing something that 95% of people that I've encountered don't do. They don't have a daily log of their work. And this is important because it allows you to look over what you've done over a longer period of time, remember what you've done well and what you didn't do well, and allows you to reflect on that data. So a very subjective data analysis. So moving on to analysis, it is subjective. It's journaling, and you you're journaling. You don't have hard data that you can measure and track over time, but you do have progress. You can take a look at the last cycle, the last air quotes sprint that you worked on, and get a feeling for how it went. Did you actually help move your company forward? Did you mess something up that wasn't related to your side goal? Did you do something that you were praised for? Um, Something that you were praised for in addition to what you normally do? Then see what you can do to apply that to your side goal. Basically, if you failed horribly, which I hope you do on occasion because it is very good for you. If you failed horribly, what did you do to fail? What can you do to make sure that you don't do it again? Um, and then try to summarize that up. Overall, do you need to change what you're doing? Do you need to keep going forward with what you started on? Or do you need to just completely stop and reassess? And of course, iteration. Take what you came up with and go back to step one and develop the story or goal that you are going to try to achieve in the next sprint. If you had a stumbling block that you weren't able to overcome, maybe that's what you're going to work on this cycle. Did you do well this time? Try to do better. Make sure you're always progressing towards something that improves you and something that improves the company you're working for. Figure out, make sure you are maintaining a direction and you are focusing on the right things, and then figure out what works and then doesn't. Reorient yourself whenever you've realized you've gone off the path and try to clear that up. All right, so this is a programming meetup, so I feel like I am probably obligated to show a little bit of code. Unfortunately, there isn't a ton of it. It's not really code heavy, and that's because I try to make things as simple for myself as humanly possible. This is a dumbed down version of my daily process. I have a markdown. Since I'm working in a terminal all day long, I have a alias which opens up my daily log file and lets me edit it in markdown. Since it's pure text, I don't bother with worrying about formatting or laying it out. It's not going to be pretty in Vim. It never will be. But because pretty is important to some people, including myself, to be honest, you can combine the collection of markdown files you have with VuePress. VuePress is a Vue framework which will scan a directory for markdown files, generate a static site for or using it, and serve it or allow you to build. I actually use that entire process and every day commit a daily log which goes up to my GitLab instance and builds up a page that has full navigation for every sprint that I've done and allows me to quickly do a search on the notes that I've taken. Ultimately, the goal should be to not get in the way of doing what you need to do to achieve high performance. If you putting too much effort into the coding area is fun. I know that I completely lost half a day building an automatic navigation panel generator for my instance, but that's not what you need. What you really need is the history, the logs. And to be honest, I would have strongly recommended that if you don't want to get into the code of things, you just write down in a daily journal on paper like some sort of heathen. All right, so awkward silence period. I went through this a little bit quicker than I was hoping for, but does anybody have any questions? I'll switch over to the comments. if you fill out an employer survey and make a suggestion, should you make facilitating that suggestion a side goal or vice versa? Absolutely, Matthew. I don't believe in ever making a suggestion if I don't have a plan for following through. Same thing with a complaint. If you are going to make a suggestion or complaint without anything backing it, without data or without a plan, then you aren't helping anybody with anything. So whenever you have that suggestion, internally come up with that plan and try to fulfill it. The higher ups may not have a high value on that suggestion, but other people might. So you can always work on it on the side. Okay, I'll let the awkward silence run for about 20 to 30 more seconds. Okay then, well, oops, let me switch back. Thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And I hope you got something out of this. Yes, Maria, I will find a place to get that markdown text and share it with the organization. So, oh, okay, so questions, I'll go back. So yes, Maria, I will get the markdown format and provide it to the organizers so that can be shared as well. James, yes, the common things I see when analyzing my daily logs at sprint end to make it efficient are, to be honest, problems that I've encountered. I learn a lot of things from what I failed at. There's been a lot of false starts on projects, a lot of just absolute explosions in the side projects that I've worked on, and all of those things are good. You have either learned technical skill or you have learned a way to better analyze what you're doing and not cause that trouble. So look for your problems, see where they repeat, and either solve that problem by not doing that anymore, or solve that problem by identifying what the root cause of it and clearing that out of the way. All right. So Angie has a comment as well. The thing I struggle most with something like this is getting in the habit and sticking with it. Any tips on that front? Yes. So the most important thing in a habit isn't actually doing it. It is the fact that you are tying it to something that you are already doing. In the morning, the first thing that I do is I get a cup of coffee. Then I set up in front of my desk, set my coffee down, and open up my terminal. For me, that is my trigger. I instantly open up my log and I instantly open up my daily logger and look at what I did the day before and make a couple of notes beforehand because there's a lot going on throughout the day and I promise I won't be able to keep track of all of it. Then through the day, if possible, try to tie it to another thing that you always do. Have you gone to the restroom and sat back down at your desk? That's a good time to pin the log, your notes, to or to that point. And then finally, at the end of the day, you have something that triggers you to start shutting down. I am very firm on being shut off at 5 o'clock. So at 5:50 exactly, because I've been watching the clock for the last 30 minutes, I pull up my log again and finish filling out my summary, the 1 through 8, I think it was, as well as any final notes that I have. Basically, it's about building it into your current routine versus trying to make it something new that you're doing just because you're supposed to be doing it. And the other side of it is make it very easy. You don't overcomplicate it. Write it on on a sticky note every single day if it allows you to actually do it. Thank you for that question, Angie. Okay, I'll give a few more seconds.
Yeah, well, thank you, Trent. That was a lot of really good information that I think we can all take something away from that, even on sales and marketing side, such as myself, on tracking some metrics for organizational goals and strategies, etc. So thank you very, very much. Appreciate you joining us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next up, who we have with us today is Scott joining us. There we go. Scott. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing well, Tara.
Thanks again for joining us tonight. Your talk is Design Systems with Web Components.
Yep.
It's simple, and I will let you take it from here.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, Tara, thanks for hosting, and thanks to the Stat for putting on another good meetup. So I'm here tonight to talk about design systems with Stencil, which is kind of the idea about how to kind of create like a uniform look across your organization when you're using multiple front-end frameworks. So first off, just a little bit about myself. So my name is Scott Wittrock. I am a developer, product manager, and designer. And when I put this together, I've been in lockdown for a little while. So I thought any sign of green is very, just gives some good feelings. And we could all use some of those right now. Hopefully everybody is, staying healthy and safe as we deal with this fun global pandemic. But anyways, back into some of the coding. So other stuff that so to give a little bit of structure of the talk I'm going to give. So I'm going to tee it up for about 3-4 minutes, and then I'm going to do some live coding of creating some web components. So first off, a little bit of background is I like to build apps, and I've built a number of them over the years. So I built an app called Daily Sprint. It was great, talking a little bit about productivity and habits. This was a great app. I found that I was building all of these different lists and never would actually get to them. So I built an app that actually just deletes everything off your list every 24 hours. It's kind of a fun little quirk, and it's just like it's for things that you have to do for that day. And then they're gone, and you open it up, and it's a fresh start. I'm also working on a white labeled app for nutritionists called My Meal Planner to help them connect more. And I also built another app that I use that's in beta right now, which is just called One. And the idea is that, again, everybody was talking about habits before. The idea is to be able to help you achieve your habits by using data and some predictive scheduling on it. So why am I talking about all of these apps? Because as I was building these, I kind of noticed some patterns. A lot of these different applications needed similar components, and I found myself building them over and over and over again. It was just like, oh, this one needs a login screen. Okay, I'm going to build a login screen. It looks basically the same as the other one, so I'd copy and paste some code. And then I realized after doing that, oh, there was a bug in the login screen. So now I have to go back and make updates in that code and make changes to it, and then it just became very not manageable. So what I did was I started going down this kind of journey of creating what I called my garage. My garage is basically just an NPM package that I can put all of these different reusable components in. My first attempt to do that was just as an Angular module, which was great when Angular was very popular, but a problem started arising. So it worked when Angular was popular, just as popular as Tiger King. If you haven't seen it, it's very entertaining and also a little scary to watch. But as time kind of progressed, anybody who's familiar with the front end JavaScript ecosystem right now, I love watching or listening to like Modern Web's podcasts where every week it's basically a new framework that I haven't heard of before. And explicitly, React and Vue over the last few years have definitely been growing in popularity. Myself, I have a background in Angular development, and I like it quite a bit. But as like React became more and more popular, I started kind of leaning more and more towards like, oh, should I try out, this React stuff and see what it's all about? I think the thing that really got me was static site generation. So there's a framework called Gatsby that uses React that I wanted to just build a basic blog with. And it was really easy to use, but I wanted to keep it the same as like my portfolio site that was built in Angular. So now I had this Angular site and this blog, but I wanted to have the same like navigation component, which arose. So I kind of went down this exploration of like, how can I solve this problem? How can I build a component once and be able to use it in multiple instances? After doing a little bit of research, the general direction that I was seeing a lot of people go in was they're talking about web components. So using the standard that's kind of built in to modern browsers. The nice thing is that over the last few years, a few of the key kind of APIs and elements have been built into most of like the modern web browsers. So you can use them pretty safely without having to use too many polyfills for it. So two key kind of components of web components is this idea of the custom elements. So a custom element is an element that you can define the behavior for. And what you do is you register the HTML tag when your page first loads. So for instance, here you can have an element that's called, my custom element, and the browser will just know how to render that. The other thing that's really critical to the use of web components is this idea of the shadow DOM. So if you haven't worked with the shadow DOM yet, it's an abstraction of the actual document object that lives within the browser. And the advantage that this has is that it creates encapsulation. So if you're familiar with Angular, you know that like your CSS can be encapsulated inside of the component. So you don't have to worry about your CSS styles conflicting, which can be really useful when you're trying to build a reusable component library. You can call something, class container, and you don't have to worry about, is somebody using Bootstrap in their application and it's gonna, blow apart my component because it has a conflicting class name. So that's kind of the base web components. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use they don't call it a framework, they kind of call it a tooling, which is called Stencil. So let me just jump over to the Stencil site. So Stencil is they call it a tool chain for building reusable, scalable design systems. It's brought to you by the same person who brought you Ionic Framework, which is a way to use web technologies to build a native iOS and Android application. It's a UI framework, as well as they have this new thing called Capacitor, which is getting a lot of traction. It's like the new version of Cordova, kind of rebuilt from the ground up with a lot of cool features. The Ionic framework is actually built using Stencil. And what Stencil does is it allows you to create these reusable components in JSX and export them and have different targets, one of which being straight web components. So it's a little bit about Stencil. So next up is I'm going to do a demo where I'm going to create a component. So here's a little bit of an overview, which I'll get to in a moment, but let's just jump over into the code. So just to start off, I'm just going to do an npm init stencil, and I'm just going to call it fancy button. So we're just going to go ahead and create, oops, live stencil. Sorry, you just run stencil, and then it will actually ask you, it has this little command line tool, which is really useful. So you can build a PWA, you can build an actual app, but what we want to build is we want to build a collection of components that can be used anywhere. So we're going to call it fancy button, and confirm that. So now we can see we have this folder, and we'll cd into it. Actually, let's just open it up. Look at what we get right out of the box. So right out of the box, we get a few things. And let me start this. Run start. So it has some built-in tooling, which is always great with any third-party library. And we can see that we're just loading on localhost 333. We've got this word, hello world, I'm Stencil, don't call me a framework, JS. So what is rendering that is there is an index.html file here, and it has a web component in it called my web component, and then it has some props that are being passed in. So if you're familiar with, any JavaScript framework, they all have this idea of passing props into a component. So we've got a first name and a last name. Then if we actually look into the component here, we can see that we've got this TSX file. So the TSX is JSX, but typed. If you haven't used TypeScript before, I'm a huge fan of being able to strongly type things with TypeScript, which is really can be really useful when you're passing large objects around. But if you are familiar with React, you can see this looks very familiar. A couple different things are, you can see it has a component decorator on here that gives it a tag name. So this is what specifies how you actually utilize this in the application. You've got a first name, a middle name, and a last name. So these are different props that can be passed in. And then down here, you've got a render component. And this is what's actually being returned back to the user. So if I add something in here, you can see that we've got some live reloading, and we've got hello added in there. Okay, so the other thing that's really nice as well is that it actually has built-in documentation. So when you run an npm run build, it actually generates this file for you that pulls in your properties and the description that you set in your TSX file, which is really useful. So if we wanted to go ahead and create a new component, let's go ahead and run npm run. Here, I'll bring this up so we can see it a little bit here. Generate. So this runs the stencil generate command. And what it's going to do is just going to ask for a name. It's going to ask you for a few additional files that you want to create. And then it goes ahead and generates your fancy button component. And we can see here that it has a new tag of fancy button. So let's go ahead and use this component in our HTML. All we have to do is just get rid of that. And because we can do that because we're bringing in the web components here, and this is what's actually registering them to the screen. So let's npm run start again, our dev server up and running, and cool, that's working, but we're not seeing anything because nothing is happening with our fancy button yet. So if we go in and, it's in our tests, so fancy button TSX. Let's actually start creating our fancy button. So I've got just some basic code here that I'm going to add in. There's a lot of cool stuff with stencil, like this idea of the slot. You can actually pass in HTML from your parent component, which is really useful. We're just going to grab that, and then I'm just going to copy some CSS. You don't have to watch me type out a bunch of this stuff. And we're going to drop that into our CSS file. And the nice thing, as I mentioned before, is that this is all encapsulated. So like, I call this class button, but we really don't have to worry too much about what that actually is doing. So we can see now that we have this button that has this nice little hover state that we want to be able to reuse in a number of different places. So in order to reuse it, we need to do a couple things. So the first is we need to be able to pass information into this component. So the way you do that is with the prop decorator, and we're just going to call it text. And we're going to set it, we're just going to say that it's a string. And then down here, what we can do to access it is in the curly brackets, we can just do this.text, just like that. Okay, so now we re-render, and then once this is done, that goes away because in our HTML, we're not passing in a text property. So in straight JavaScript, you can just pass in a value like this, text click me, and then it's updated there. The other thing that we need to do is we need to be able to do something when this button is clicked. So you can do that by using an onClick function, and you can pass it in an anonymous function, and then we're just going to do on button click. We're going to call this function, and then we are going to pull in the event. So one thing to be careful of is if you are using VS Code's kind of auto import, which is really useful, is you want to make sure that you are pulling in from Stencil core. You know, there might be a few other libraries and interfaces that use something called event. So make sure that you do bring it in from Stencil core. And we're just going to call this one user. This is going to be of type event emitter. And then the same thing here, when you bring in the type of event emitter, you want to make sure that you're bringing it in from Stencil core. And then what you can do next is we're just going to define a function called button click. And all we're going to do is we're just going to call user clicked. Like that. Oh, sorry. User clicked has a method called emit, and that's what actually sends out the information. I'm getting an error here. Why is that? Let me just copy this in from my code. It's in there. Okay, so, and then the other thing that we want to do, so in order to capture that on the outside, you do add an event listener to the object. So this is a little ugly in straight JavaScript, but it gets a lot easier when you're using a framework. So in this case, what we're doing is we're just creating a reference to our fancy button element. And then here, we're just adding an event listener for the user clicked. And if everything works right, cool. So we get the alert that the user clicked the button. Okay, so cool. Now we have a button that is reusable within Stencil here. So how do you actually utilize that in Angular framework? So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our package.json, and Stencil actually has some pretty useful ways to be able to export it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a build that is just straight web components. Something that they just actually released in the last couple of, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, is this thing called bindings, which actually lets you generate native Angular components and React components. And the reason why that's useful is React is still catching up a little bit with web components to be able to pass objects as props into your project. So you can actually generate React components using the bindings. So for the Angular one, we're just going to generate the just the straight web components. Let me just grab my cheater code here. Okay. So we need to add into our scripts a publish command. So this is just running an npm run build and an npm publish in here. And then the other thing that you need to do in order for the npm publish to work is that you have to give it a name. So I have a namespace, just Scott Wittrock, and this is just going to be published at fancy button. I'm a fan of GitHub's package registry. It is similar to, oops, shoot, sorry, I had this open before, to NPM, but provides you the same functionality, but it kind of keeps it all in one place. So you can use their package registry. So I have a fancy button package up here that we're going to override. In order to do that, we do just need to update our version number, so that way we don't get any conflicts. And then we're going to run npm run publish. Hopefully this works. I ran into an error when I was doing it just before this, but if not, we can still move forward with the other version. Okay, so while that's publishing, what I'm going to do is go ahead and create my Angular project. So I'm just going to create a base Angular project by just using the command line tool, ng new, and we'll just call it fancy button Angular, and get that installing. We're not going to use Angular routing, and we'll use SCSS. Installing. Yes, sorry, there was an error with the publish, but I have the exact same thing already up and live. Typically, it is just as simple just to run that npm run publish, and then you actually publish it up to the store or up to the package registry. If you want, you can also publish it to the npm JS package registry. You can also, if you're developing locally, what you can do is you can actually just link the repository locally to your projects. So if you have like a directory of, here's all your different projects, you can just drop it into your npm install, your npm packages folder, and do a link. So that way, it's actually really useful when you're doing like local development. Say you're working on a project that's consuming your design system, you can kind of work on it without having to publish up to GitHub and then pull down a new version, which can be really useful when troubleshooting. Okay, so let's go into our Angular project. Oops. And let's go, yeah, that should work. Okay. I'm not sure why that's not opening up for me. 1 second, there we go. Okay, so now we're in our Angular project, and just clear that out. Cool, npm. So the next thing I have to do, or the first thing, is to install our fancy button. This is just pulling it down from the npm registry, npm script, npmi. Sorry, 1 sec here. Let's go into how you'd actually utilize this. Oh, sorry, I'm just in the wrong folder here. On fancy button Angular. That's why it wasn't opening before. Cool. Okay. I just jumped back into the stencil project instead of the Angular project. So now if I do that npm install fancy button, that should add it into our package. Okay, perfect. So now I've got our NPM installed. So in order to use this in Angular, there is two things that you have to do. The Panic documentation is pretty good about kind of walking you through this. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to add, you have to be able to tell Angular that you're using custom components, because Angular will kind of yell at you if you are not using proper like H1 tags. So you have to add a custom schema reference. So to do that, you want to add this custom element schema. Again, be sure when you're importing, this caused me a lot of frustration, is that you want to import from Angular core, not the Angular compiler, to make this work. So this is allowing us to use that fancy button HTML tag. And then the other thing that you need to do is you actually have to register the components. So in your main.ts folder, what you want to do is you want to pull in this define, the define custom elements function. And you just want to run that in your code, kind of right when you're like bootstrapping your application. And then once you do that, you should be able to go into your app component and give it. Let's go over into localhost. Oops, got to run npm run start. And then while that's teeing up, let's just give it a name. So text, let's say, since this is Angular, you need to pass it in as a string, or else it's going to assume that it's a property. Loading this up, so we have our button. And then the nice thing with Angular is that you can actually just capture that event listener by specifying it in parentheses. And we just need to add our function here to handle it. And let's just do an alert, hello. And if that worked, missed something, alert, hello, click. Oh, didn't save there. Hey, and there we go. So now we got the alert working. So you can see this is a lot easier to hook up the actual event listener to it. So I'm happy to, I'll push this code up to GitHub, and I'll post a link in the chat with an example to this and the presentation as well. And with that, go over to any questions. So here's just a recap of what we did, and here's me. So let me take a look at questions here. So how fancy is it from? Yeah, so it's maybe not a super fancy button. See, Thomas, you had a how fancy is it from 1 to 10? Host name, speakers. So that's a good question. Michael, you said, does this work for React Native Vue components? I haven't played around with React Native a ton. My guess would be that it might not. So the way to check would be to see how React Native handles web components. But my understanding is that it kind of has like an abstraction layer that it then compiles down to the native iOS and Android components versus using like H1 and div tags and web components. So that's a great question. Just kind of scrolling back up here. Oh yeah, Matt, something about PC names or Elon Musk. Yeah, that's me. I name all my components after tech leaders of different sorts. Let's see. Tiny habits are amazing. I see a reference again for The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. Good book. Another one that's really popular, since we were talking about habits earlier, was Atomic Habits. I don't know who the author was, but it's really useful talking about different ways to build habits throughout your day. Cool. I think that was all the questions. Sorry if I didn't get to any of yours. I did see the presentations will be recorded. I think that everything will be uploaded to YouTube after this. Great question. Are you currently using web components in React? Anything to look out for? Yes. So React, let me see if I can pull up documentation here. So React as a framework does have some limitations, especially around being able to, be able to pass an object in as a prop. It just doesn't like it. There is a workaround that you can do where you basically wrap the web component in another component and add some additional, you basically access the element directly using JavaScript, which isn't amazing. Yeah, you can see here, you can do a use effect to be able to add those on, which can be a little complex. But the one thing, so if you are using React, I would take a look at these bindings, because these actually look super handy. And what it does is that it actually will render this out as just a native React component. So you can use it exactly like a React component, which is really useful. I did a couple wrapping of the components in React, and it was a little bit of a headache. So on my to-do list for quickly after this is actually to play around with these bindings. They are, like I said, pretty new. They came out just in the last 3-4 weeks from the Ionic team. How is IE support for web components, and how far back do polyfill support? That is a good question. So my guess would be not very good. And the reason why is that anything from the Ionic team, so the Ionic framework, capacitor, stencil in general, they take a pretty hardline approach towards future-proofing and building things forward. So if you do have to support IE in older versions, web components are probably not quite safe to use yet. You can look at, there was a project called the Polymer project, which was kind of similar to Stencil. I think it was supported by Google. It's been around for a while, but what it does is it polyfills web components back. So it does have, support for older browsers. So if you do have to support IE, that might be something worth looking into. Are you using web components for micro front ends? That's a great question. So one of the reasons why I started going down this for a number of projects was kind of that use case. So I typically had been kind of like an Angular developer in the past. It was just the framework I was comfortable with. It had all the tooling there that was there. But as static site generators started coming, becoming more of a thing and being able to have that performance boost, I started playing around with a few different static site generators, and specifically with Gatsby, which is kind of React based. And it was really easy to be able to kind of create a common look. So we just go to, so I just have a blog page. So this is built in Gatsby. It has this bottom is a web component, and this top nav bar is a web component. All of the other pages, the portfolio, the talks, the about, this is an Angular project. So I'm now over on an Angular project, and it looks, very similar across the line. So you can kind of click between. The only thing is the Angular project does have that little crossfade, but now this is back over into the Gatsby project. So you can create very seamless websites using web components. What's the most complicated component you've created so far? That's a great question. One of the reasons why I started doing this was I wanted to build a reusable camera like preview component. So that was probably the most complex one that I created. It had to support different devices, different screen sizes, show the preview, and then being able to support like a tap to snap a picture using like the canvas. So that was a lot of time just getting things to size right and to capture right. So that's a good question. If there aren't any other questions, feel free to keep dropping them in. I might respond throughout the rest of the presentation, but I think JavaScript Jeopardy is up next, Tara.
That is correct. Thank you so much, Scott, for your presentation. A lot of really good information there that it's all new for me, obviously, but I learned quite a bit. So thank you very much.
Cool. Happy to share.
I am going to keep you right here with me. And Steve, I'm going to bring you in, and we are going to have fun with some JavaScript Jeopardy. Just a reminder to everyone, there is a delay. So there is going to be some awkward silence while we are waiting to see if perhaps nobody knows the answer, or we're just waiting for your chat to come through. But if you think you know the answer, please drop it down into the comment section. We'll be watching, and hopefully we'll get them all answered. We have 10 questions, so let's get started. I will start off with the first question. Not all of them are Jeopardy formatted, just a warning. It's just kind of a fun play on words. So first one, why did the developer go broke? This is kind of like one of those dad jokes.
It's a tough one.
And I was thinking about, I should have had some music in the background playing for the wait time. What about you guys? Do you have any guesses? Why did the developer
If you ask my
go
kids,
broke?
I'm not very good at dad jokes.
Fortunately, it wasn't a prereq.
My guess is there's a pun in there somewhere.
You are correct. Angular is the answer. Not quite. Okay, I'll give it just a couple more seconds. You guys want to take one last stab? The answer is because he used up all his cash. I mean, that was funny. That was funny, right? That was a good one. All right. Scott, you want to read the next one?
Sure. This open source data query and manipulation language for APIs has a logo that looks surprisingly similar to Belgium's famous Atomium landmark.
Yes.
I think I know this one.
I don't know anything about the landmark, but I have a guess for maybe what it is.
How many people do you think are Googling Belgium's famous Atomium landmark? I can't say that word. GraphQL, we've got some right answers.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
Could be my answer too.
Nice, very nice. All right, Steve, you got the next one.
All right. I got another dad joke.
You got a dad joke.
How does NASA organize a party?
Oh, I had something here. I don't know if you can hear that.
Oh, yes, I can. Very nice, very nice. Scott for the win.
I was very disappointed that the weather caused a delay in SpaceX launch yesterday.
I know.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere that the weather is nice right now? I feel like everybody I've been talking to, it's been
Not in
bad
the Southeast.
No? How does NASA organize a party? Somebody's got to get this one. I'm going to count to 10 in my head. And then we'll give the answer. UFO, something relaunching? No, not quite. They plan it. There we go. Daniel got it.
Nice.
They plan it. Well done. Well done. Okay. According to Google, this is the browser most often used to download Google's Chrome.
Hmm.
Did you see how long that delay was, though? IE, there. Oh, a lot of people got that one. Wow, those all came through at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Daniel in first. But then there was a lot. So well done. Good job, guys. Scott, you're up.
Why are people afraid of computers? Another dad joke.
I mean, aside from the fact that if they break, I have no idea what to do about it other than make it worse because I think that I know what to do. But they have bites. It
Wow.
bites. Nice. Wow, you guys are good. I'm impressed.
Never would have thought that.
Right?
They bite.
They bite. All right, Steve.
The code name for the most recent release of Ember is?
Do we have any Ember fans in the audience tonight?
I have never used Ember.
No?
Nope. Angular.js, Angular, React, Vue, but not Ember.
Not Ember. That's okay. So it's okay that you don't know this question. We'll give you a pass.
I feel like Ember was always just kind of like, it was there, just like hanging out with all the other kids, but never quite in the party.
Oh, poor Ember. What is remember? That's a good one, but not quite. That is funny. All right, final call. Code name. The answer is, what is Octane? Crickets. That one did not go over well. Okay, next question. It's a static site generator built on ReactJS, and its name is similar to a 1925 American novel.
I know this one.
I hope everybody gets this one.
Like that fossil fuel.
Gatsby, good job. Yep, that one came in quick. Everybody knew that one. All right, we have 3 more questions. Scott, you got this one.
What do you call monkeys who shared an Amazon account?
Low on cash.
Yeah.
Primates. Yep.
Yep.
But the low on cash, that's funny too.
Primates.
All right. Next question, Steve.
This is the name of Vue's equivalent of React hooks.
So I wonder, did Vue just copy React, or did React maybe copy Vue?
Good question. Composition. There we go.
Yep.
Composition API. Okay, final question. Why did the computer show up at work late? This is another funny dad joke. Everybody write these down to tell somebody tomorrow. Make somebody smile. Why did the computer show up at work late? And it has nothing to do with the alarm not going off. Or a dog eating
I like
something.
that. Network traffic.
Network.
Good
Oh,
one.
that's actually a really good one.
That was one I was thinking that.
Very close. Very close, though.
Reboot.
Not quite. Oh, you guys are so close. It had a virus.
That's a good one.
I feel like somebody's going to get this. It forgot to
It's a
change
dream
its copy script.
Points for that one. That's good.
Not a good whistler. Okay, final call. Why did the computer show up to work late? The answer is it had a hard drive. So simple, but so clever. All right, well, thank you all for playing along. I hope you had fun playing JavaScript Jeopardy with us. Scott, Steve, thank you so much for joining in with me.
No problem.
You're welcome.
All right, Steve, are you ready to
I
give
am.
your talk?
I am ready.
All right, let me swap our screens out here, and you can take it away.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining the first virtual meetup. And so tonight I want to talk to you about code extensions, or VS Code extensions. I'm also going to talk about fonts and themes. So first, who am I? I'm Steve Pietrek. I work, as Tara mentioned, I work for Insight in their digital innovation group, focusing on IT consulting. I'm an app dev practice manager, front-end developer. I also organize the Triangle React Meetup. So I'm sure I've probably met quite a few of you. You can find me at Pietrek, and then some of my other information as well. So the agenda for tonight, I want to talk about the versions of VS Code. I always get a lot of questions on why I have a green icon and not a blue icon when I run code. So I wanted to walk through that. Some fonts. It's important that you have a good font. Some color themes, productivity extensions, linting formatting extensions, and then we'll walk through recommended extensions and how to make sure that your team is using the needed extensions when they run your application. So first up is versions. There's two versions, and the first one is the VS Code stable build. So Scott was running, he had the blue icon. He was running the stable build. The VS Code team is very very consistent in releasing once a month. I run the VS Code Insiders build. So typically there's a new release every single day. Sometimes there's multiple releases. If there's, obviously we're running code that's, or running an application that's getting updated very frequently. So there has been times when there's been bugs. Today, for example, the extensions button was missing. But after I updated it first thing this morning, but then they had an update later on, and the extensions button was visible again. Sometimes they don't have it releases. There may be a couple days in between. So, but I really like getting the latest version, and the team is pretty good at minimizing the number of bugs. All right, so fonts. So I'm going to walk through 3 fonts. First 2 are free. The third one is a paid one. So Source Code Pro is a very common font used, and you can see here it's pretty basic, nice. Second one is Fire Code. You'll notice with this one there's some ligatures in terms of the arrow icon or arrow character, so which is actually, it's an equal and a greater sign. So some of the characters will get pulled together into a ligature. The one I use is Dank Mano. Very cool name, but it is a paid version. I can't remember the exact cost. It's probably $50 or $60, but really like that font. All right, so we talked about fonts, we've talked about versions. So the next one is, now we want to make it look pretty. And everybody's got different, a lot of people like the dark modes, dark themes. Sometimes you need light themes. For example, I typically do dark themes, but if I'm taking the train from Raleigh to Charlotte and the sun's shining in, it's very nice to be able to switch to a light theme so you can actually read what you're typing. So the first theme that I want to walk through is Winter is Coming. So John Papa, heavy in the Angular community, works for Microsoft, used to work for Disney, came up with this theme. So there's multiple different versions of his theme. This one is a black. He also has a blue. He has ones with italics, ones without italics. Here's the light theme as well. The next theme is Night Owl. Sarah Drasner came up with or created this theme. This is a very popular theme. So here's a blue theme for Night Owl. We have a dark, and then they also, as well, they have a light theme. So the great thing is, like I said, is if you're taking a train down to Charlotte and the sun's shining in, you can quickly change to a light theme and have the same look other than the color of the theme. 2 themes that I've been using recently, fairly new themes, still probably not as popular, or definitely not as popular as the first 2. First one is Gloom. It's definitely, if you live in the Raleigh area or in the Southeast, it's been a good theme with how much rain we've been getting. So this is a very nice theme, similar to the other 2, but the next one is cool name, Snazzy Operator. This was the one I've been currently using for probably for the last 3 weeks, and just really enjoy this theme. All right, so covered versions of VS Code. We've covered fonts. We've covered themes. Now let's actually get into the extensions and focusing around the productivity ones. So the first one is auto close tag. So if you're writing a lot of HTML, having the ability to type in a div and have it auto close, you don't have to close it off, is very helpful, and time can and saves a lot of time when you're actually writing HTML. So if you're writing it, you're also going to run into cases where you're renaming for those times when you for example, you're stubbing out a new component, you're just adding divs. Now you go ahead and create some subcomponents, and so the ability to quickly rename. So this extension allows you to rename. I'll caveat that sometimes this extension gets confused. And if you start switching, especially in very complex HTML structures, it'll start changing areas outside of where it should. And so you have to go back and but for about 95% of the time, this extension works great. But just be cognizant of running into that where it'll change the next element. So for the most part, if you're doing any type of React or Vue or Angular, you're creating components. Your components are fairly small. You're splitting your components up into separate files. These files should be fairly small, but there are cases where, if you're looking at container components that are pulling in or any of the API integration files, your files may get a little long. So we want the ability to quickly navigate across within a file. So bookmarks is a great, so Control-1, Control-2 will allow you to quickly navigate through bookmarks. So it's a really nice way of, instead of having to scroll through your file. So I'm very passionate about component-driven development using Storybook. Hopefully at some point I'll give a presentation on those two topics. And a lot of times, especially if I'm taking the train, for example, if I'm working in a place, not recently, but if I'm working in a coffee shop or where I don't have two monitors, it's not the greatest experience to be able to have to alt-tab between two different applications, your browser and your editor. So with Browser Preview, I'm able to be able to display a browser directly within VS Code. In this particular case, I'm showing a component within Storybook. Storybook is responsive, so we have the sidebar where I can select different components. Canvas is actually what this currently selected component looks like, and add-ons. Obviously, it supports hot reloading, so as I'm making changes, I can automatically see those, and I don't have to toggle to another browser window in order to see those changes. So it's a really great time saver. Obviously being at home, having multiple monitors, it's less used. But for those times when you're on an airplane, you're on a train, or at Starbucks, it's a great, or at a client where I don't have an external monitor, it's a great extension. So this next extension is a fairly new extension. It's called Code Tour. The idea is that we can record and play back guided walkthroughs of your code base. So it's a great for new developers to come up to speed with your particular application. It's also great. I've used it for PR reviews. So I will just quickly say, hey, I want you to take a look at these 2 areas, or these 12 areas within the code, and be able to record a code tour and have the person who's reviewing the code, actually, when they pull down that branch, they can quickly get a good understanding of what code changes were made, why those code changes were made, And it's also been very helpful for new developers to come up to speed with maybe setting up a development environment or learning the different areas of the application. The next two extensions deal with Git. So Git history. So in this particular case, what I've done is I've opened it up for a particular file, and I can see all the PRs that have been approved. Be able to take a look at which files were changed for each one of those. So it's a great one. I use Git Kraken for my Git UI. So provides a lot of similar capabilities. But one I use a lot is called Git Lens. So this is a great way of being able to move your mouse over a particular line of code and see who made the change, when the change was last made. You can also drill into that particular file and be able to highlight the different areas of the application associated with the commits for each one. So in this particular case, the merge PR 991, we're able to see what changes were made during that PR. So the next extension is kind of a fun extension. It kind of makes you feel cool, powerful as you're typing, and it's called Power Mode. So as you type, it actually adds different visualizations or animations. So in this particular case, it's actually shaking your screen. I couldn't handle the shaking the screen, but I like having it display the animation. There's different ones. You can do like fireworks and other things. So there's a lot of configurations that you can do. So just a neat. So when you're really getting into a groove, having the kids come over and actually, as you're typing, it's showing the animation. They think it's pretty cool. Version lens. So there's lots of different. There's npm control updates, which is a npm package for checking to see which of your packages are out of date. Version lens, what it does is it actually displays your version and the latest version. I can click on the latest version; it'll automatically update my package JSON. Works very well. Ran into a couple issues with some private npm repositories and just from a timing perspective. So in some other projects, I disable it. But for projects where it just goes directly against npm, it's very quick and very helpful. Some other productivity extensions that I use, they're bracket pair colorizer 2. So being able to highlight in colors, so a quick way of seeing where the brackets are within your code. Duplicate action, so being able to duplicate files and directories in VS Code. Image preview, being able to see the image that you're referencing or you're importing directly within the gutter. Path IntelliSense, rewrap, so if reformats code comments and other text to a given length. Settings sync, so this is one of the new features that have just been added to VS Code. They have their own settings sync, but I've been using settings sync for a while. It's a great, you run a command to upload your settings. You can go over to a different device and download those and make sure everything's in sync. So typically I run a MacBook, but I do have a Surface Pro that, for testing, if I need to do any IE testing where Parallels is just too slow, I can quickly make sure that I get my settings updated in that environment. Sort, being able to sort lines or words to do highlight. Allows you to include highlights in there or any comments. It's specified to-dos, they show up. So it's a quick way of, from a visualization perspective, to be able to see where your to-dos are. My most recent project has been Vue, so Vueter, from a Vue tooling for VS Code perspective. So the next set of extensions is around linting and formatting. I'm very passionate about TypeScript and ESLint and Prettier from a code perspective. So here's some additional extensions. We have CSS and JS and ESLint. ESLint disable snippets. Occasionally, you may want to disable some of the rules within your code. Markdown lint, Prettier, probably one of my most favorite frameworks. Very opinionated way of formatting your code. StyleLint Plus, TSLint for TypeScript, and then VS Code styled components for if you do any type of styled components. Now, if you have a lot of developers on your team, and most of them are using VS Code, it seems VS Code is one of the more popular editors. How do we make sure that they have all the needed extensions, such as ESLint and Prettier and TSLint, for example? So VS Code has a way to set up recommended extensions. So by going into creating the extensions.json file, we're able to specify which of the package names that we want to include. So when VS Code first loads, it will prompt the user to install those recommended extensions. If they go into the extensions list and they type in @recommended, it will also show you all the workspace recommendation or recommended extensions, so they can easily just go ahead and click on those. So it's just a quick way of making sure that people have a consistent interface with their extensions. So that was a very quick tour of some of the fonts, themes, version of VS Code, productivity extensions, and linting and formatting extensions, as well as what I do to make sure the team has a consistent development environment. So I want to thank everyone for their time, and I will toggle over to the questions. All right. All right. So Ala, his favorite power mode is Flames. I need to try that out. Scott, power mode extension. Yep, I love it. I will give it a little bit, probably about 20 seconds to see if there's any additional questions. All right. So Matt had a question. Is there something you wish there was a VS Code extension for but doesn't exist that you know of? The answer is I can't think of anything that is missing. It's interesting. I wrote it down and you know, a little bit of history. Been a developer for many years. Started off in using a proprietary framework a long time ago, but did Borland Delphi for many years, and then switched to Visual Studio. And Visual Studio out of the box had a lot of missing features. So then JetBrains came out with ReSharper, which was kind of the most very needed extension. Worked within WebStorm, brackets, Atom, Sublime Text, and then Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or VS Code was released. I said I'm not going to use it until they have extensions, and then they started releasing the extensions And to answer the question, I can't think of anything that's missing. It's VS Code. It's fast, and it always seems like there's extension out there that people have. So constantly going out, there's a great user interface or a great site for going out there and looking at all the themes. And also all the extensions and seeing what's popular, what are people using. So typically about once a month, I'll go out there and take a look and see what the new hotness is, and what other people are using. Thanks for that question, Matthew. All right. Well, thanks everybody for their time. I hope everyone stays safe, and I'll turn it over to you, Tara.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for joining us today. Again, we learned so much from all of the talks here tonight, so I really appreciate all of you making it out tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the talks as well. I am just going to finish off by sharing our upcoming events again with everyone. We would love to have you join us. Again, every month, every week, we put on a meetup that is framework specific. Tomorrow we have Angular International Women's Day events. It's an all-day event full of talks. I think it starts at 9 a.m. Eastern and goes till 3:30. So take a look at angularmeetup.com to see the full list of schedule. You can also toggle on that page to the other framework meetups to see what else is coming up. We would love to have you there. And if you have any talk ideas or would like to get involved with us, please reach out via email at hi@thisdot.co. Hope everybody has a good rest of your night, and we will see you next time. Take care.